Howdy. There we go. Let's try that again. Howdy. All right, that's how we do it in Texas. It's a picture of Texas A&M University and the University of Texas playing football. And I heard there's a delegate in the audience from the University of Texas, and we have a deep, deep history of rivalry that dates back to 1894. But however, that rivalry makes us better. Academically, global outreach, the amount of international students coming into our universities, and the fact that we're both here, because I used to be a delegate as well, sitting in those seats. And here I am now, about to spread my message. And it's good to see other people here from Texas and from around the world. Just the other day, actually yesterday, there's a gentleman in this audience right now that's one of my brothers. We come from the same unit, the same company, and we have a lot of mutual friends. And so he's getting his master's degree. I'm finishing up my undergrad because I'm a current student. So he's setting the bar high. Though I might have years on him and I might have outranked him, now he's kind of outranking me in education, and I got to step it up. So thank you for that. Now I have to look at master's degrees after this. So let's go ahead and kick this off. So I come from a military family, kind of a background. My parents didn't serve, but my grandparents did. My grandmother's a war bride from Scotland who met my grandfather in World War II in France. And that's a picture of them together. The gentleman on the right is my wife's grandfather who fought in the Battle of the Bulge. And the gentleman all the way to the left is my great-grandfather, Archibald Mackay, who fought with the Seaforth Highlanders in World War I, or as the Brits would call the Great War. And where you see people wearing the poppy to remember what happened in World War I. And then you'll see a black beret laying on the table, which is one of my friends who could not make it to my wedding because he overdosed on drugs because he couldn't get away from the demons he was fighting that he saw in Iraq, and it caught up to him. And his way to cope with it was drugs. And so we wanted to honor them. So I joined the Marine Corps June 25th, 2001, before 9/11 happened. I was in boot camp. I was getting ready to graduate 10 days later after 9/11. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I didn't know where I was going. The people told me that, hey, get ready for war. They took down our towers. We're about to go get them. So get ready. And so I did. But my journey didn't begin in Iraq and Afghanistan. My journey actually began in Okinawa, Japan, where I go around the Pacific training. And so I put up this picture here to kind of give you some context of what the Marine Corps is like. So if you take a look at this picture, you're going to see different colors, different genders, people from different countries. We have people from Lebanon being represented, Africa being represented, South America, Mexico. Hola, ¿cómo estás? We have guys from the West Indies and people from Europe, all serving together. And that's what it was about. Talk about diversity at its finest. Things weren't always perfect, but this is what we had. And this is what happens. And then we end up at war, fighting a battle against an unknown enemy that dresses like you and I, more or less, because we don't know who they are until they start shooting at us. So my journey really began in Okinawa on the left photo, and then on the right photo after Okinawa, I end up in Haiti in 2004. A real peacekeeping mission that really wasn't so peaceful. President Aristide was ousted out of office, so we were called up to go respond to that in Port-au-Prince, Haiti in February 2004. And so we get to Haiti, and it was crazy because we're fighting gangbangers and drug runners because we just disrupted their trade when we showed up to try to help the people. President Aristide was corrupt, and he let people run rampant and do corrupt things and let drugs flow through his country until we come in, start going door to door, and things started changing. Well, people didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that we were there and we disrupted what they were doing. And so in return, they were shooting at us. And one of these photos that you see on the left is kind of near a Toyota dealership in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and we're responding to some guys that were shooting at us. But those were the streets that we're patrolling on every day in places like Cité Soleil, Pétionville, and Haiti, and it was very sad to see the way people were living in these conditions. That was traumatic to me. That was the first time I saw a dead body laying in the streets. The first time I saw a child get shot in the head by a Haitian cop, and a bunch of people run over and take off that backpack from that kid and take his clothes off and run away. And the only thing that we could do was sit there and watch it, because we see this cop pull out a pistol and point it at this child, and we're aimed in and we're ready to kill this cop, and our commander says, "You can't do this. This isn't your place. You're just here on a peacekeeping mission. If you get shot at, then you can respond back." And here we are watching a child get shot in the head, and our hands are tied. Try living with that. That hurts. And so that was my first experience in Haiti. First experience getting shot at, and my first experience feeling like I can't help anybody. And then the UN comes in and replaces us in June of 2004, and we head back to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and we get ready for our next deployment. That's to Iraq in 2005. While this is going on, we also had the Battle of Fallujah going on. They called it Phantom Fury in Iraq. And so we get ready to replace the guys over in Phantom Fury during that operation. And this is the time I was with the unit called 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines. And so in 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines, we're getting ready to head to Cherry Point. This is my mom with me and one of my friends, John Konopka, who is also with me in the photo on the right as well. I've known John for a long time. I've known him since I was in Okinawa in 2002 and 2003. I'm still friends with John today. He comes from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And we're in the same platoon together. And we'd be on patrols, and we're always getting blown up. It was like playing Russian roulette. Whose vehicle is going to get hit today? And that's the game that we played. We would go track down insurgents, and then we'd get blown up, repeat the cycle again. You never knew what was going to happen. You just prayed that, hey, I get to go home and I get to wake up tomorrow. Because not only were we getting blown up, we're also getting shot at with rockets. And we're getting mortared as well. So you can be sitting down having dinner, talking with your friends, and then next thing you know, the sirens are going off and things are exploding around you. And you're trying to run to a bunker and not get hit. That was my reality, and that ended up actually being my safe space, believe it or not, because that was my new normalcy. That was my reality, and that was my world. I felt comfortable in that chaotic environment. If you take a look at this, the gentleman on the left is Navy Corpsman Doc Lacona. Comes from New York City, New York. He's now a firefighter in New York. And you're going to see some blood on his arm. And in that bag are body parts from a gentleman named Stephen Baldwin. Stephen Baldwin was on camp guard one day, and I was the driver. And that's Stephen on the right. So I was the driver in vehicle number 4. And Stephen Baldwin comes off of camp guard, and I'm told, hey, Corporal Schwartz, we need you to go over to another platoon. They need some leadership over there. You're not going to drive today. I was driving earlier. I was driving that evening, and then in the morning, they tell me to go to another platoon. Well, Stephen comes off of camp guard and drives. We're out on patrol. His platoon's out on patrol. They're driving around in an area called Nasawa Salim, right outside of Abu Ghraib prison. They're going around a propane factory, and they hit an IED. And the insurgents were getting creative, because what they would do is they would take a propane tank, take out all the gas in it, pack it full of PE4 explosives, so you had this huge tank full of explosives. And then not only that, they would take anti-tank mines and put it on top as well to make it even more catastrophic. And to get the final effect, they would take an actual propane tank full of propane just to get that nice fireball effect. And that's what he drove over. Vehicle number 4, my vehicle, and Stephen didn't make it. It was so bad, and the blast was so bad, that his rifle got blown into pieces and went through his body, and his body smashed to the side of the vehicle, and his head cracked from here to the back of his head. And he was still breathing when they got him on the stretcher, and they brought him over to Charlie Surgical at Abu Ghraib Prison, and he said, "I'll be okay." He never made it off that flight alive. He was dead before they could even get him to Baghdad or Germany. That could have been me. And I was out there as well when that happened. And so when I got to that crater that Humvee was in, it was about the size of this area right here. That's how big it was. And I could stand inside of it and almost put my hands up and still not even reach the top. Every day that was happening. And before we had up-armored Humvees, we had no armor. And imagine getting hit by something like that. And so one of the things what we would do is we'd set up ambushes. And so we would go out, we'd have our patrols drive up and down the road to lure people out to put roadside bombs out there, and then we'd take them out. And so I'm in an ambush with 4 other Marines, and we're sitting there, and we're right down the road, kind of from Abu Ghraib Prison, about 2.5, 3 kilometers. There's an overpass to my right, and your road is going from Baghdad all the way to Fallujah. And our patrol's out there driving around. So the patrol's driving, they drive on the other side of the overpass, and they got hit by an IED. Nothing happens, they keep going. Well, there's a vehicle that comes driving towards the Baghdad side. And so I put my rifle up to my eyes, and I'm looking through the scope, and I'm looking down the barrel, and I'm watching these people put stuff in the road. So what is my response? I follow my rules of engagement and my escalations of force. So nobody's shooting at me at this point. I don't see any weapons, but I see bombs. So I shoot at the vehicle and not necessarily the people. I'm gonna disable the vehicle. That way we could go ahead and take these people into custody, detain them, bring them over to one of the camps for questioning to try to get more intelligence out of them and more information and try to find out where they're getting the materials from and who's giving them their orders. The guys get back in the vehicle and he starts driving. I didn't know there were 2 people in the vehicle. But I take another shot, and this time the shot has the vehicle kind of spin around and hit a guardrail. A gentleman gets out running with blood covered all over him, and his arms are up, and he's just running like this. And I could see the fear in his eyes from over 300 meters away. And he runs towards a semi-truck and tries to get in it, so I shoot the semi-truck's tires, and that stops right there. The guy doesn't get in. He just kind of stands there, and he's looking at this truck, and my patrol comes driving up. I get a call over the radio that says, "Hey, Corporal Schwartz, you need to get out of your position. You just killed somebody." My heart went all the way down to my feet. I was trained for this. We actually look forward to this in war, believe it or not. Because that's what you're trained to do. You're trained to go out there and kill the people that are trying to kill you, or you kill the people that are trying to kill people in the villages. And so you have this built up thing inside of you that you almost want to explore, and is, what is it like to kill somebody? What is this feeling? Well, I can definitely tell you it didn't feel good. Because when I got out of my position and I walk up to the patrol, my staff sergeant tells me, "Hey, go take a look in the vehicle." I shot the guy right below his ear. And there I am looking at his brother, telling him, "Hey, why did I kill him?" I knew what they were doing. They had bombs. They were going to kill us. but I wasn't being shot at, and that affected me. Because here I am looking at this guy, telling him why I killed his brother and why he's about to go to prison as well. And it wasn't glorious. It didn't feel good. I wasn't excited. And then they tell me, hey, you need to go pick up that body and put it in the back seat of the vehicle because the Iraqi police are going to come by and they're going to take this vehicle away and they're going to tow it out of here. Don't worry about it. You're fine. You're a hero. You saved your guys. Thank you, Marine. You've done a great job. I didn't feel like I did a great job. I just felt like I was doing a job to protect the ones that I love to the left and to the right of me. And so I get back to the camp over in Fallujah where we're at. And my lieutenant gives me a cell phone. It was a satellite phone, actually. And he said, hey, call your parents. Just let them know you're okay. Make a phone call to my dad. And I broke down on the phone. And I just said, Dad, I didn't mean to do it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't mean to do it. But I had to. And he told me, he said, hey, you're doing your job. I don't know what it's like over there, but you're doing your job. You're protecting your men. And you got to keep doing that. You got to keep fighting and you got to survive. But more importantly, protect the ones that you promised to bring home. And that's what I tried to do. And so this feeling of guilt would continue. And I still feel it today. But I'm able to cope with it now. And so my guys made me out to be a hero because I was the first person in my platoon to kill somebody. We called it popping the cherry for us. And I was the one that did it. And I was the one that had the best shot out of anybody so far in my entire unit because I shot a guy in the head right below his ear at over 300 meters away. And so I'd continue on that deployment for about another 5 months. And these are the guys that didn't make it. So there's a little bit of a combination of guys from 2005 into the deployment in 2006. I didn't make it to Ramadi, but I was in Fallujah. But all the names in Ramadi were the guys that I brought up from a private first class in the Marines to a corporal. I watched these guys get promoted because I poured everything I knew into them to be great leaders and to go to war and try to have some humanity and ethics and teach that to their Marines later on. Because it always wasn't about killing and glory. It's kind of about, hey, we had this job to do in Iraq, whether we believe the mission or not. But we're Marines and we follow orders, and the best that we can do is try to protect one another and make sure that we're not out there creating atrocities, because that's happened over there as well. The Haditha massacre is one of them. The stuff at Abu Ghraib prison, the tortures, you name it. Because when there's not oversight and when there's not people with morality, things like that happen. And then you end up in jail or you end up murdering people. And then what do? We create more enemies. And those enemies and our actions create even more third order effects, like ISIS. But these names up there, like Jacob Beisel, Adam Murray, Timothy Roos, we used to go fishing together, hang out, go on trips together. Some of the other names up there, we'd go to places like New York City, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. on the weekends just to get away from our base when we were back in the U.S. So you get to know these guys really well. They're your family. I felt closer to these guys than my own family as fighting for one another. And these are some of the faces of the fallen from my unit when I was with 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines on that deployment. So the one on the left is the guys that we lost in Fallujah. The ones on the right were all the guys that came from my platoon and my company. And some of them I was directly in charge of them. And those guys were the ones that had died in Ramadi. While they were dying in Ramadi, I was having a good time in Washington, D.C. I took a little bit of a break from Iraq, went to a different unit. I was hanging out, kind of taking a break from the hell that I was in. medicating with alcohol, making bad decisions, living for the moment, and then spending almost every Thursday at Bethesda, Walter Reed Medical Hospital, visiting all my friends that are getting hurt overseas and getting sent back home with missing legs, missing pieces to their body, mangled, and then getting phone calls, hearing about the guys on the right in the photo. And so my world just continued to crumble and continued to crumble and continued to crumble. But this was my happy place, believe it or not. This was my normalcy. This was it. I didn't know what else to do, and I didn't even want to get out. Yet I hated what I was doing, yet I loved it so much. And I continued to raise my right hand and ask for more. And so I did. And there's going to be some pretty graphic photos going forward. So if you can't handle it, I'd like to ask for you to step out, because I don't want to offend anybody. But it could be gory and it could be offensive. I just want to forewarn you. All right? This is a common sight in a war zone. This is in Iraq. And I can guarantee the guys walking past this person on the ground that's dead, it's just like another thing. It's just like, it's literally like looking at a piece of trash on the ground. Not saying that that person is a piece of trash, but you don't think anything of it because it is so common to see that. You just walk by, look at it, and be like, okay, hey, what time are we done with patrol? I'm getting hungry. How are you guys doing? But we're also on the receiving end of that as well. Some of these photos I pulled off the internet because Time magazine put them out. We weren't really allowed to carry cameras when we were deployed. I think that's probably a good thing. But the journalists would follow us all the time. And this is some of the photos that they would take. And that's just helping out your fellow man, your fellow Marine. And then sometimes the enemies that we're fighting, they meet the Marines in a bad way. It's one of the insurgents and one of the guys that's pulling off a PKM machine gun that the insurgent had. And I say insurgent because I don't want to say, hey, this one's from Yemen, this one's from Chechnya, this one's from Saudi or Syria or wherever these guys come from. So it's just easier for me to say insurgent, just all-encompassing, but this is a common sight. Like when I look at this doesn't even affect me. I know that it's there. I know that this is in the past. But it doesn't, I don't feel sad, but it's a constant reminder of what not to do. We could be better than this. Maybe your foreign policy can be a little bit better as well. But sometimes you have a little bit of humanity even in the middle of hell. Or you're trying to at least reach out to the families, because most of these guys, like, we have families back home. We see the children. And sometimes it's even more traumatic to see a child get hurt than it does to see your best friend get hurt. But we try to do our best and do a little bit of humanitarian aid while we're there. Afghanistan's a lot different when you're doing humanitarian aid. The Taliban doesn't like that. Iraq was a little bit different. We really didn't get shot at or anything when we're trying to help out the Iraqis in the villages that we're operating in. So that was a good thing for us. But we try to do our best. We try to put together a little bit of pieces of things that we've destroyed. And then we're off to the Afghan frontier. Again, diversity. Most of the guys on the right are literally fighting for their freedom. Most of these guys have green cards. And the fact that when they get back from this deployment, or maybe even while they were on deployment, some of them ended up getting their citizenship for the U.S. That's kind of one of the things. Hey, if you sign up, we'll give you your citizenship. And people go through great lengths just to get that. One of the guys that's kind of kneeling on the left, and I'll talk about him in a little bit. And then one of the guys in the photo on the right, both of them will end up losing both of their legs. That's Brandon Rumball on the left, Corporal Rumball. He was one of my Marines. I was a squad leader. We're in Musa Qala, Afghanistan, in Helmand Province. So for the Brits that are in the audience and the Aussies, they were called OP Herrick, Camp Bastion. If that sounds familiar, if you might have heard that on the news. There's a big coalition fight in Helmand Province. And Musa Qala was one of the areas where we went in and took over from the British military there. But we were in a place called Patrol Base 7171, so the eastings and northings on the topographical map comes out to 7171. We're on top of a hill. And we were the most southern point in our area of operations, yet we're just about 3 kilometers north of Sangin. One of those places where Prince Harry would patrol, getting some firefights with the Taliban. I'm just right up the road from them. Cheers. And the guy on the right is Richie Chavis. And so Richie was a point man on a patrol, steps on an IED. Brandon Rumball runs over there to save him and try to help him out and ends up stepping on an IED as well, just trying to go save his friend and his Marine. And so you get 2 guys taken out in a matter of seconds. And Afghanistan was a completely different fight than what it was in Iraq. In Afghanistan, we're fighting something worse than insurgents. We're fighting something that dates back to like when Alexander the Great tried to go through Afghanistan and failed. When the Russians tried to go through and failed. And you had people like the Mujahideen that we helped defeat the Russians, and then later on people would defect from the Mujahideen and then start the Taliban. And those were the people we were fighting, people that know that land for millennia, fighting us and hitting us in the same places that they hit the Russians, same places that they've hit the British, same places that they've hit when Alexander the Great was going through in the Afghan campaign. I mean, it's these lands are well known to the Afghan people, and that's what we're fighting against. We're fighting against something that is so deep-rooted into a culture that I don't think we'll ever get rid of it no matter what. And that's what we're fighting against. But one of the things that we're fighting for is that this fight, again, was different than Iraq. We're bringing stability to the villages because people like Rahelia, that's going to come up here and speak, people like her were being marginalized. People like her were being threatened because she was wanting an education. And when we try to provide that, the Taliban would attack us even harder. Because an educated people is a smart people, and an educated people is a threat to the Taliban rule. Because you're able to think outside of the box. And that was what we were doing over there. We're actually doing some decent stuff in Afghanistan because of what we're doing for the villages, of bringing in people to teach them, giving them stability, trying to give them like different ways of growing crops. Because if I were to come up to you and put a gun to your head and say, hey, if you don't grow this opium, then I'm going to kill you. But I'm going to kill your children first. And then I'm going to kill you. And I'm going to find your grandparents and kill them. And then I'm going to start finding everybody else in your family and kill them as well if you do not grow this one plant so we could turn it into heroin and opium. Yet we would try to come in and say, hey, we had this wheat. Or we'd have this other crop. Hey, try to grow this. And then the Taliban would come back in and change the game on us. But we had a little bit of saving grace in Afghanistan to kind of get onto a lighter point, is that we had bomb dogs. And one of the programs that we used was called the Improvised Explosive Device Detection Dog. And this was like little angels running around. These were literally our guardian angels. Because we were getting blown up so bad by the Taliban and so close, we needed something to deter that. And so we started using Labrador retrievers to go out there off leash, where we could send them out literally to the door right there, and they would go find the bombs, so that way we could try to at least mitigate some of the casualties. Because war is an equal opportunity employer in terms of getting shot at and blown up, and you'll see this later on. But we had this right there, and sometimes you have just a little bit of heaven right in the middle of hell, and those dogs were it. I was fortunate enough to adopt one of them. My dog's name is Tigger. He got hurt in Afghanistan, so the Marine Corps retired him, and I was fortunate enough to adopt him. My last deployment to Afghanistan, I was a kennel supervisor. I was moved out of an infantry platoon, and I was put in charge of 32 Marines with 32 dogs. It was one of the best experiences that I had, was working with the bomb dogs. It was therapeutic, to say the least. For the Aussies in the room, that uniform should look familiar. So joint operations, this is my buddy Ryan on the right. He's a crew chief on the Huey helicopters, but is doing joint operations with the Aussie commandos, where they're shot out of the sky. Ryan was one of the survivors, the Aussies were not. Yet they're fighting side by side and trying to save one another. Like I said, it's an equal opportunity employer. It doesn't care where you come from, if you're royalty, black, white, brown, it doesn't matter. Male, female, it affects everybody. Like I said, it affects everyone. That's Christy Ennis on the right, single leg amputee, was in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. Now she's all over the world. She tried to climb Mount Everest, got pretty far up there, so she's doing pretty great things, trying to bring awareness to combat veterans, suicide awareness, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. If you look at the picture in the middle, the woman on the right is Captain Mary Kolar. She's still active duty Army. She's part of a thing called a female engagement team. She was attached to the Green Berets, Army Special Forces. The gentleman on our left, Jonathan Schmidt, was killed. Both of them were out on patrol together. They were out doing an operation. There's another guy. I didn't have time to put his photo up as well, but the connection there with Mary and I is that one of the guys that was out there on that patrol with her was killed in an ambush. That guy went to the same university as my wife and ended up being best friends with one of my wife's sorority sisters. And we all got together to do this big event, this big hiking event in North Carolina over at Fort Bragg Army Base. And it's kind of where you have civilians and military or former military kind of get together, and you kind of go through this training session with the Special Forces cadre, and they kind of put you through hell for about 13 hours. You end up hiking 12, carrying a lot of weight on your back, logs, people on your shoulders, just to kind of give people somewhat of some military experience to kind of bridge that gap between civilian and military. But I had met Mary, and she told me this incredible story that they were out on a mission, and they went into a compound and were ambushed. Well, the 2 Green Berets were killed, and she is dragging them out of a compound and shooting back at the people shooting at her. And it's funny because the military, a lot of times, you're like, hey, it's a man's sport. There's no place for a woman. Women in the infantry, oh, we can't do that. But here we are, having a woman grab Green Berets, Special Forces, and dragging them out to get them to the medevac helicopter. And she continued to go back and continue to be deployed more. Mary's an incredible person. She's a good friend, and my hat's off to her because she's out there getting it done in the Army, paving the path forward for other women to come behind her. So I'm pretty proud of her for that. The 2 women on the left, those are 2 faces of the fallen killed in Afghanistan. Like I said, it's an equal opportunity employer. They don't discriminate. But this is a daily thing for us. This is what we're living through. This is what we're having to deal with. This is the aftermath as well. And these are the guys that died on my deployment, both of them in Iraq. In Afghanistan. I keep saying Iraq. Stacy Green, Staff Sergeant Stacy Green, that died December 10th, 2010. Him and I both served together in the previous unit in Iraq, and then he survives Iraq and gets killed in Afghanistan. But you live through that, and you come out on the other side broken. And by broken, what I mean is when I got back from my deployment in 2012, I was married to a woman from New Jersey. So it's kind of funny. But we lasted about 3 deployments, and on my 3rd deployment, she found somebody else to occupy her time. Again, that's a very common story as well in the military. That has no borders whatsoever. But she found somebody else, another Marine that was also married as well. So it's kind of this crazy, nasty cycle of stuff in the military that just continues and continues. But I come back and I go to Austin, Texas, where my sister and brother-in-law are living at. And I'm legally separated at this point. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to find somebody that wants to love me, for who I am and what I've been through. And so my wife and I go on a date. We meet at this place called Trudy's off of Guadalupe Street, right there near the University of Texas. And we're sitting there, and I'm really nervous. And I tell my future wife, hey, I come with baggage. I've been to war. I've killed people. I've had a lot of my friends die. I haven't always coped with PTSD. Very healthy. And she looked at me and she said, bring it on. I work with kids with PTSD over at the School for the Blind, so easy day. But I tell you what, if you want a relationship, you better get some help. And so I kind of sat back and thought about that for a minute. And it's like, okay, we'll see what happens. Then we started dating, and things got serious. And she looked at me and she said, if you want to marry me, you better get some help. I've been in therapy since 2006, but it's been off and on. A lot of times I would cope with drinking to fall asleep. There's a point in time when I had a 45 pistol, a 1911 pistol underneath my pillow in the barracks. because I'd have nightmares so bad about the guy that I killed in Iraq would come back, and he was coming after me to take revenge. And I would wake up and almost feel like paralyzed, like I couldn't move. And I was so scared to get out of my bed in the barracks where I have over 100 Marines living right next door to me. And sometimes even a roommate. A fellow sergeant would be in the room, but yet I'm so scared to get out of my rack because of the nightmares that I was having, and I had a pistol underneath my pillow because I was so afraid. It was so paralyzing, and I was coping with it by drinking and not getting sleep, and it was just like this manifestation of ugliness that was attacking me. And so I would go through therapy, and then I had a young psychologist. Gee, she must have been right out of her PhD program, joined the Navy, and she kind of put it to me, and she's like, "I'm not going to coddle you. You're better than this." And she kind of helped me move forward, and we started talking about my issues. And then moving forward, meeting my wife, I got into something called prolonged exposure therapy. And to be quite honest, I'd rather go back to Iraq and Afghanistan and get blown up and shot at before going through that type of therapy again, because you're talking about the most traumatic event in your life. And that was me killing that guy over and over and over and over again for months. But it saved me because it allows me to stand up here and talk to you and tell you my story and have this appreciation. You know, the way I compartmentalize it is the fact that I fought for this. This is what I fought for. Because when I'm standing here looking at everybody in here, this is beautiful. This is better than art. This is who we are as humans and as a species. This is us. This is the best of us. And I really wish some of my veteran friends, though I have a brother right here that I served with, bro, I wish our friends could be here, sitting in this audience, sharing these experiences, getting to know one another. Because I've walked down that dark road where ending my life would be easier than living it. Because I didn't want to deal with what was ahead of me and what was behind me. And I sat there and thought about that. How easy would it be for me to kill myself? Some of my friends have already done that. I mean, I have a gun. Like that'd be pretty easy. I mean, at the time, my ex-wife was with somebody else. I mean, what do I have to live for? Until one of my friends kind of yanked my chain and told me to pull my head out and get yourself straight. One of my fellow Marines did that for me. And then also, dating my wife helped me with that as well. And then getting into a different type of therapy and looking at the brighter side of things. And then some of the reuniting as well has been therapeutic, at least for me. Because the guy that you see in the picture with me is Jack Doherty. He's living in London right now. He's now a mechanical engineer. I'm really proud of him. But we met at Camp Bastion in 2010, 2011. It's like the Rugby World Cup was going on. We're transitioning back. We're a bunch of Americans over on the British side, over at one of the cafes, and we just started making friends with the British soldiers. We shared a common tongue. So why not get to know these guys and gals that are operating in the same area as us? I mean, some of the medevacs that would come in to save our guys would be British doctors flying in the helicopters, extracting our hurt guys out. And we'd be sending our pararescue guys from the Air Force to go save British soldiers, Australian soldiers, and the Georgians as well. But we get together, we make friends, and then 10 years later, we're going to hang out again. I'm going to see him next month when I go back to London. But I saw him 7 years after, in 2017, when my wife and I went to go spread my mother's ashes. That was a picture of her dancing with me. That's the last time I'd ever danced with my mom. I survived all these war zones and all this atrocity to come home, to finally be back with my family, and for my mom to get cancer and die about a year later, when I ran away from home again. Because I was starting to transition back. I was starting to come back to being a normal person again. But there was just something missing inside of me. Something didn't feel right. So what did I do? I went right back. I lasted about a year and a half in college, and I said, you know what, this is absolutely boring. Let me go back to something that's real. So I went back as a civilian contractor, except for this time I was advising and assisting the Afghan Special Forces. I was training them to shoot mortars like what I did in the Marines. But while I was there, I learned about some stuff that was going on, and about the Hazaras and the Pashtuns and the tribal indifferences going on, because I was dealing with that daily with the platoons that I was working with in the Afghan military. But one way to heal from some of the stuff that you deal with in Afghanistan is breaking bread with the guys that you're training and putting yourself out there. You see, I wasn't armed, but these guys were. The only type of security that I had was asking some guys from the U.S. Army, hey, I need some guardian angels to go with me to go train the Afghans. But because I learned a little bit of Arabic before thinking I would go to Iraq, but going to Afghanistan, I knew just a little bit of stuff in the Quran. Like Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And so just being able to say that to the Afghans, and they're hearing me say something from their religion, that broke down a lot of barriers, because they're interested, like, how do you know this? How do you know about this? You're a Christian. You're a person of the book. How do you know our stuff? I wanted to know who they were as a people, because I'm training them. I'm not out on patrol with them anymore. Like, I'm training these guys. I'm getting paid to do this. And I want to be invested. And I got to know them as people. Got to know about how they operate in life, like just what's going on in their provinces. Some of the guys would come to work with battered uniforms, and I would give them money to go back out into the market and buy uniforms. And sometimes I'd help my interpreter and give him a little bit of extra money because he had such a low salary, and he was risking his life every day to come work with me. But I put myself out there. I'd break bread with them. I would learn to speak their language. They would teach me Dari. But I'd teach them rudimentary mathematics, so that way they could at least learn their job and apply it. And like learning to be empathetic and also empowering as well. And that felt really good. That felt good to the point to where they told me that, hey, Derek, you never have to worry about your safety in Afghanistan. You're one of us. You're our teacher. You're our brother. Because some of the contractors didn't have the same experience as me. We had a green on blue incident when I was there on another camp where a contractor was killed by an Afghan. I don't know what was the reason behind that, but before I got there was a gentleman that came from the U.S. that was a law enforcement professional, and he was there to teach them how to do evidence collection. We call this tactical site exploitation, where you go in and you learn to look at a room and figure out what's going on and pull evidence out of there, gather intelligence. So that was his job, was to train the Afghans how to do this when they're out there operating. But this guy did not treat the Afghans very well. He's never been in the military, but he was a law enforcement officer. And he treated the Afghans very badly to the point one day that the Afghans drove by him. He was walking over to their side of the camp, and they drove by him, pulled a pistol out and pointed it right at him and just kind of made one of those gestures and then continued driving. The Afghan colonel called the American colonel and said, "I can no longer guarantee the safety of one of your people. He needs to go." And he was gone in less than 24 hours. But we've created some of that environment because we aren't able to sit down and break bread with people and get to know them and give people respect. You know, funny enough about respect is that I have a lot of respect for the Taliban, believe it or not. You got to learn how to respect somebody and learn who you're fighting against. Because if you just take it at face value, then you lose the fight every time. But if you actually invest in what you're doing, the outcome is going to be a lot different. And that's why I say sometimes, like, people ask me, like, you respect the Taliban? I'm like, yeah, you have to respect your enemies. Because if you take them for granted, it's not going to end up well for you or for anybody else. From a military standpoint, if you respect your enemies, then you can strategically plan to try to mitigate catastrophic events later on down the road. But that was me in Afghanistan as a civilian. But while I was there, I got tired of it. And I had some people advocate, my wife advocate, and some officers that I was working with advocate and say, "Hey, you should go get a degree, go get a higher education and see where that takes you. This contracting stuff is for the birds. A change in presidency and the contract might shrink." Well, that happened. President Trump was elected in the office and the contract shrunk. The company that had the contract lost it to somebody else. And they were in this battle of who's going to win the next multi-million-dollar contract. Well, that went away. And I'm glad I applied to some good universities and get accepted, because this has really been my transition. Because what happened is that my mom dies in October, and I come home in November, just a few days later. And I start my journey at Texas A&M University. And because I started my journey at Texas A&M University as a civilian and as Derek Schwartz, not Sergeant Schwartz, or hey, that Marine, is that it put me in a place called Bangkok, Thailand at the United Nations with 7 other cadets from my university sitting in those seats. And it's been a beautiful experience ever since. That's what college has done for me. It's just allowed me to take my experiences in the military and help the ones that are sitting next to me in class, maybe with some of their life issues going on, but yet in return, and I say y'all, because if I was at the same school, we'd be sitting right next to one another in class, and I'd say, y'all teach me how to be a better person and teach me how to be normal again, how to study, how to write papers, how to set up my schedule for the next semester, how, hey, you know what? It's okay that you have choices now. You're not being told what to do. It's not like this paradigm shift at looking at how to figure out what professor I need to sit down with and take. And so y'all and them have helped me out very much in my transition process. And I appreciate that very much. And so in this picture right here, they're my friends. These are my classmates from my degree program. It's construction science. And the 4 of them are getting their, they ordered their Aggie rings. So it's like a big thing at A&M that we do there. Some people look at us like we're crazy. We are. It's a cult. I get it. But they're holding a picture of me in my dress blues because I wasn't able to be there on that coveted day. I was actually in Ankara, Turkey on my internship, where I was building a brand new American embassy with 12 other countries being represented on that project. That was beautiful. But it was just so cool that I had such an impact on their lives that they did this for me. because that means like I mean something to them. I'm not just like that one veteran in the class. Like I'm just a regular student with them, and I'm one of their friends and family now. But as this transition continues to go, there's still lasting effects of the war. So you see the photo with me in the crutches. The guy in the middle is Christian Cedeno. He's a single leg amputee. He was hurt in Afghanistan. And he's one of my friends that I met when I got out, when I moved back to Texas. And he ended up being one of the groomsmen in my wedding. Now, if you remember that photo where you see the black beret laying on the table for the fallen, well, that's the gentleman on the right with the green pants and the hat on and the white shirt. That's Sonny. Sonny went up to Michigan right before my wedding. And he was up there with a friend of his. They were on a hunting trip. And they decided, hey, you know what? Let's have a date with some heroin. And Sonny overdosed. And I remember Sonny talking to me about me being in therapy. And he's like, why are you in therapy? You know what my therapy is? He said, my therapy is this. I like to smoke, and I like to shoot stuff up in my veins because it makes me forget. And I felt pity for him. Because I was, at the time, like I was doing really well, and yet I have a friend that I love that is going down a very dark path that he can't get out of because he has an addiction to cover up something. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a wound that just won't go away. And he's looking at me saying, therapy's crap. But he didn't make it. He didn't make it to my wedding. He wasn't able to be a groomsman. However, his wife, my wife and I, we still maintain contact with her and her family. We go visit them in New Orleans every time we're in the area. We make a very, very, very much conscious effort to include her, and they're really good family friends of ours. And so you see the guy in the middle holding up the two pistols. This is us in Haiti. This is Steve O. He's a South Korean. PTSD got the best of him, and he took his own life. I knew Steve as like this vibrant young man that had so much to give, yet didn't know how to cope. And years later down the road, he takes his own life. I mean, talk about like getting hit by a train is what it felt like. It was just, what? He did what? I could probably put up so many more pictures of guys that I've known that have committed suicide. I would be here for a whole other session. It is that bad. We do a great, great job of preparing you for war. We do an absolute terrible job at teaching you how to come home. And that's the truth. Steve Calloway, on the right, hung himself. We deployed together. He's one of my Marines. But this is a group of my friends from school, as I transition some more, that I really like to look at this and be like, this is what I fought for right there. Was to be able to have something like that and have some sort of a support group, because there's very few veterans in that photo. There's 4 of us, actually 5 of us. One of the guys right next to me, you might know, is Corporal Payne, or Sergeant Payne, Eric Payne, from 1st Battalion, 8th Marines Alpha Company. But yeah, he's my neighbor, but he's going to school now with me as well. But you create these support groups, and you create these friend groups that just kind of help you feel normal. And I love it. And I'm very proud to be a part of that. And this was, I wanted to show you a picture of this and try to tell you, why is this relevant to war and stuff like that. This was my internship. This is in Chukarumbar district in Ankara, Turkey. And I say 12 countries that are represented because not only did we have a massive workforce of Turkish laborers, but we had engineers as well. But we had people from Romania, like Kosovo, the Ivory Coast, Liberia, Nigeria, South America, Mexico, the Netherlands, India, Sri Lanka, the Philippines. And so all these people that are represented on this one American project came together to build this embassy. One of the companies that I worked with, that's what they do is they go in, they build an embassy, and then they pick people up from the country that they work in and bring them to other projects. They have so many projects going on right now, but they're giving people a very, very good wage and a very good salary. And it was a diverse workforce. It was amazing because I'm having Turkish engineers teach me how to read structural drawings. I'm having Filipinos teach me how to look through measurements and instruments and how to look at rebar. I'm having a guy from Kosovo teaching me about structures and the facade that's going on the building. We have a young lady, Merve, that's working the architectural stuff going on, and she's teaching me how the stone placement is supposed to be. We have a woman from Sri Lanka teaching me, like, hey, this is how you use AutoCAD. And so all these people from around the world are teaching me how to do my job that I'm going to transition into when I get out of college and work in project management. And I thought this was probably one of the best places that I could have ever been to experience an internship. Because I'd try to tell my classmates, hey, you need to get out there in the world and do this. There's opportunities to go international, and they're going to pay you to do that. So why not seize the moment and go do that? No, I would just rather stay in Texas next to my parents, go live with them and drive to work. I don't know if I could go out there to that country. What's Turkey like? Hey, ain't that the Middle East? And I'm like, no, man, no, don't be saying that. That's highly offensive. What? Are you serious? Yeah, man. That's what it's about. You go live there and you live in Turkey. You live amongst the people. You learn the language to get by on a daily basis on how to buy fruit and lamb from the grocery store. And then you learn a little bit of phrases to break the ice with the Turkish workers, and then you become friends with them. And in return, they bring you to their villages. And they want to treat you like family. And that's what the experience was about. And I tried to relay that to my friends. A couple of them did international internships, and I'm very proud of them. But some people are afraid to step outside of their comfort zone and experience something like this. And that's unfortunate. And a lot of my friends that are veterans are still the same way as well. Some of the people that I know wouldn't be caught dead in a room with a bunch of Muslims. Or people that might look like a Muslim. Some of them might look at you and be like, yep, no, we're good, man. I got the stereotype already planted in my head. And it's sad because they don't get to share experiences like this. They just want to talk about war. Oh, man, it was so bad. Hey, do you remember so-and-so when he died? And it's like, no, I really don't want to talk about that. Let's not forget about it. Let's move past it, and let's go forward. Let's talk about the future, not keep going back to the past. Because if we stay in the past, we can't ever move forward. And unfortunately, some of my friends are living in the past. And I love them, and I hope the best. But for me, this is what I love doing. Being amongst everybody in here, because I want to learn from everyone in here. I survived to do that. There's a reason why I'm here, and I don't know what that reason is, but it's a good feeling to stand up here and share this with you. And so, like I said, on that internship, you make friends. So there I am sitting in a mosque for Turkey up by the Black Sea, right next to a guy that he ends up showing up. This guy's name is Schwartz. But Schwartz comes in. We needed a mason, foreman, to come in and do all the mason work. And this guy shows up and he's talking to me in English, but he has an accent from like the UK. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, well, okay, what intelligence agency are you working for? But he's like, no, man, I learned English working in Ireland and England. And that's how, I learned that part of it, the English, not the Yankee English like what you have. And I was like, bro, I'm definitely not a Yankee, man. I'm from Texas. But we became really good friends, and he just showed me his culture. And the guy sitting next to Schwartz is Hayate. He's a Kurd, so he's Kurdish. And I think we all know what's going on in that region of the world. But here we are, all hanging out together, sharing experiences, and that's what I got out of my internship. It's just something like that. It opens me up to different things, and because I get to share my experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan with them, Hayati actually, through translation with Schwartz, would talk to me about, hey man, we were in Iraq at the same time. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, I was a contractor. I was doing the construction out there on the bases. Hey, when you were in Afghanistan, were you on this base? And I was like, yeah, I was there. Hey, I was there as well. It was a small world. Had no idea. But it was just, we had some common ground there, and it was great. But we mustn't forget, if you're looking at this photo, that's a child standing next to his father's tombstone. And that's him on the right, laying right next to it as well. This is Arlington Cemetery in Washington, D.C. I just spent time there recently in January with my wife. There was snow on the ground and the wreaths were out there. But I told her, I was like, hey, I want to show you something very special and very dear to my heart. I'm going to go introduce you to some of my friends. And so we're walking around, and I've been there before, and that's a picture of me on the bottom left with my buddy John, next to some of the guys that we know, but I'm out there with my wife, and she's watching me walk around, and she's just crying. Because I'm walking by, and I'm just like, I'm sad, but I'm so happy I'm like, hey, there's so-and-so. Hey, babe, hey, there's so-and-so right there. Hey, come here. Hey, all right, so this guy and I were out fishing, and then, this happens, and then I go to D.C. and go to a new unit, but he went to Ramadi, and he didn't make it back. But, hey, there was a time, like, before deployment, we're having this big get-together, and so I'm, like, sharing these stories, and she's just like, it's just coming down. And I feel that right now, like, starting to come up where I just want to just cry because it's so emotional to walk around that area and see so many of these gravestones because I know so many people there. And it's kind of like a little bit of saying in the military, it's like one of the most expensive but yet selfless ways to own a little piece of real estate in Washington, D.C. But that's Arlington Cemetery. That is something that will always be close to my heart. And I'll be moving to Washington in May, but I'm going to spend more time out there because it's a reminder. It's kind of also a reminder of like, hey, you know what? If I'm ever in a position and a policymaker wants to listen, hey, maybe we can make different decisions later on down the road in the way we look at strategic operations around the world. Hey, maybe there's a way we can learn to talk to our partners. Because what has happened recently, we were just right there on the brink of war again in Iran. If you think Iraq and Afghanistan was bad, they're ready to fight. And we're out there having this contest of who's the best between us and places like China and Russia, and we're beating our chest. And those are wars we really don't want to get into. Because if you think the casualty count was bad back then, it's going to be a whole lot worse. because we continue fighting these wars. Right now, we're still fighting a war. It's a silent war. There's a cybersecurity war going on. Our infrastructure is critical. We have espionage and intelligence gathering going on. It's crazy. But yet we're just so close, getting ready to get into another fight with somebody else. And I hope that some of y'all sitting in this room right now would remember this later on down the road when you're sitting in a position and you are one of those policymakers or prime ministers one day or ambassadors or heads of state or people that are in a position to make a decision that, hey, maybe we should think twice about doing this. Hey there, allied country, my friend. Have we really thought about this? Is this really is the juice worth the squeeze in this? What are going to be the lasting effects? Because to me, I'm just a pawn in the game. But yet it affects everybody. Here we go. Peace, love, and gig 'em. All right, that kind of concludes my speech. I hope that I was able to at least deliver a message. It's raw. I was up until about 2 a.m. putting together these slides, trying to find the right pictures. I wanted to have a little bit of impact. I didn't write anything out at all. Like I get up here and I let it come from the heart, because if I put something together, I end up messing it up anyway. And I would probably sit in the audience and look at myself and be like, dude, what are you talking about? So I stand up here and I just like let it come to me, and I can look at the photos and just it'll trigger something. And so I hope it was well received. I am still struggling with the fight with PTSD. I have traumatic brain injury as well. So like when I'm speaking up here, I might have fumbled my words, or my sentence structure might be a little out of whack. That's just like the connection in my brain, trying to make those connections. It's been an uphill battle in school. Like my memory is not as sharp as it used to be. But here I am. So it's a fight every day. And you know what? Like I was actually talking to Zach this morning. I was like, hey man, like you were saying a lot of words that are very familiar and stuff, and the next thing you know, you come out and you say, hey, my therapist said it. I'm just like, yes. All right. There's one for mental health. So my wife actually got her master's in mental health counseling, and now she's getting a graduate certification from the Bush School of Government and Public Service and Advanced International Affairs. And she wants to be part of this type of community. So it's good. She has helped me be me. She has helped me walk through this path of darkness every single step of the way. And without that support, I wouldn't be here. Thank you for your time.
Hello. Derek Nettingham, University of Chicago, U.S. Thank you for sharing. A lot of stuff to think about. So my question is coming from the perspective of someone, so I'm from a military family as well. Both parents served in the Air Force, grandfather in the Army. And I want to go into, with my master's degree, social work, but looking at how to engage with veterans in the U.S. as well. So my question is, how do you suggest or think that we can meaningfully engage in conversations with folks that have served, specifically combat veterans, to try to limit the number of folks that do lose their fight when they come home? Coming from a perspective of folks that may not have served or understand what that's like, how would that conversation get started? You noted therapy a little bit in your speech, but what are ways to do that responsibly without re-traumatizing folks as well?
I can definitely tell you, you already have common ground because you already come from a military family. That within itself right there is almost, it's a little bit of it's leveling. But if you come from, geez, I wish my wife was here because she's really good at telling people like how you would want to respond to somebody. But I can definitely tell you I have some therapists that we would talk about the trauma, but then when I was doing better, they would want to go back and talk about the trauma. And it's like, I don't want to talk about my trauma. I want to talk about what I'm doing. Like, give me some damn empowerment, please. Geez, I don't want to go back to that. But what we have found, just come from a place of empathy and be a good listener, active listening. And don't be afraid to step outside of the box and look at different ways of therapy. There's not a one size, fits all type of way. We've looked at CPT therapy and PE therapy as well, mindfulness meditation. So there's a whole host of things out there. Actually, the Military Times just put up an article saying that what we're doing right now isn't working. And that article came out yesterday. I saw it last night when I was actually putting this together. I'm like, geez, I should probably clip some of this and throw it into my slides. But I knew somebody's going to ask me a question about mental health. And so I would just say, find a good mentor, make friends with some veterans if you don't already have some. I'm sure there's some over at the University of Chicago. But get involved with your Veterans Resource Support Center on campus. We have a pretty large one. Actually, Syracuse University has an incredible Veteran Resource Center. And we've kind of modeled ours off of theirs. We have over 1,200 veterans on campus. So if you get immersed into that, because you're already part of it, you come from that family. So if you immerse yourself into that community over there and get involved, you can just really learn a lot just by listening. Because people are going to tell you what they want. It's just how you go about delivering that and helping them navigate. Because that, to me, therapy is helping me navigate through everything so I can make better coping decisions and better coping mechanisms. So, all right, thank you.
Hi. Oh, is this on? So I really appreciate how you were open about your mental health. I know it can be very difficult. Like, it's always kind of a take 2 steps forward and you feel like you're taking 10 steps back at times. So I really appreciate you opening up about that. I was wondering if you had any advice about how to open up that conversation with someone, especially with PTSD, because I know men and mental health is a severe issue. Not a lot of people feel open about talking about it. And I'm pretty open about talking about my mental health. I joke that I wear it on my sleeve. But I know it's not the case for a lot of my friends who are dealing with PTSD. So I was wondering how you would recommend from your experience to open up that conversation.
Delicately ask questions, just kind of, I have students and friends that ask me, hey, what's PTSD like? And I'm like, okay, that's not the best way to ask a question, but since you already asked, hey, here's what it's about. For me, that's okay. If you just come direct to me, I'm going to open up to you. But other people might be really reserved and have barriers up. It's just, I guess it would be kind of how you go about the conversation. Or, what school are you at right now?
I'm from the University of Alberta.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know what? The Canadians, y'all have a Department of Veteran Affairs. So I would try to maybe get linked up with that. Mm-hmm. And if there's any groups on campus, like veteran groups, I know on most campuses in the U.S. we have like the Student Veterans Association. That I think almost every campus in America has that now. But I'd be interested to hear what the Canadians have. I would explore that and probably look at that and just be like, hey, this is what I want to do. This is where I'm going. I just want to be educated. And especially if you want to talk to veterans about that. But just in terms of mental health within itself and PTSD, a lot of times you could just ask simple questions, and not even like direct questions, but like, so what was that like? How does that make you feel? Just kind of one of those.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing your story with us. The whole time you were talking, sorry, I was thinking of my father. My father fought in the Afghan war, actually, for the Navy, and still active duty in Hawaii. Same exact story. My mother left him for another man. My mother died of cancer, same exact story. But I'm just wondering, when my father first shot somebody in the war, he called me because I'm the oldest girl. And since my mother was out of the picture, I was the closest thing to him. And being 12 years old and like having my dad explain that to me was really hard, but he doesn't really share anything with us, and he does have PTSD as well. But I just wanted to know, like, how can I create peace in my own home? Like, how can I help my father or someone who's close to me or people that are close to me without going up to them and saying, hey, how is PTSD, or like, how do you deal with it? You know, just like helping them by creating a safe environment for them, because they're already, you know, coming from these really harsh environments. How do we help them? Because, I mean, he's still in it.
Just love them for who they are. Spend time with them. Make the conscious effort to spend a lot of time. Life is short. I mean, we both have losses. So it's spend as much time and support him with unwavering support. And you don't necessarily have to talk about it. He might not be ready to talk about it. But then sometimes you might have to have that hard conversation and be like, hey, Dad, have you ever thought about this? You ever thought about talking to somebody about some of the things going on? I love you. I just want you to be around forever, and I just want you to be healthy. And, you know, I want to see you happy. And just kind of maybe take it from that approach, because I want to be careful with what I say. You know, I'm not living in that home. You're living there, so it's just, I would, support's the best thing you can do. And sometimes letting it just have that compassion and letting it come from your heart, and they'll see that. And it might not be the easiest conversation. You might receive something back that you might not want to hear. But, you know, stand your ground and just continue to be there. Hopefully that helps. All right, somebody from the back, and I'll start working my way up forward. So,
Toby from the UK. I just want to say thank you for that. I was a Royal Marine for 6 years, so it kind of hit home to me as well. And I just want to say I had my own struggles when I left. I joined at 16, so when I left, I was kind of, you know, I was institutionalized. And Chatham House rules. One thing that really, it sounds a bit bizarre, but really hit home to me was I had the job of putting together a presentation when I was in Syria to train and equip the Syrians. In that presentation, I had to document all the atrocities that ISIS committed and brief the Syrians and go, if you don't do what we do, this will happen to you. And that kind of caught up with me. But I just want to say it's not so much a question, but thank you for this. It was really, really good. It's informative. And it kind of gives me hope, because I broke through. I'm doing my degree at the moment. I've got now a purpose. But I've had several friends who have committed suicide from the military, and it's just something that you don't see. And my door's always open now, but yeah, I just want to say thank you.
hey, thank you, brother. I appreciate it. This, for those who don't know, the Royal Marines and the U.S. Marines, I mean, we have a lot of history there. The Royal Marines are something else. They're an absolutely incredible fighting force. And we do a lot of stuff together. So to go back to what you were talking about, I was on the Royal Mall with my wife, and I didn't know that the UK has like a Department of Veteran Affairs thing, and there was like a veterans home right off the Royal Mall down the road from the castle. And so my wife and I were looking at this, and I'm like, Jesus, this is a real swanky looking place. Hey, let's go take a look. And I walk inside, and I'm like, hey, I'm a U.S. Marine. I was Iraq. Afghan war veteran, and this psychologist comes up, hey, you know, what are you doing here? I was like, I'm just impressed to see this. I had no idea this was going on. I mean, we had this back in the States. Can I see, like, how you're doing stuff? And she was like, yeah, sure. So she takes us on a tour around the facilities, and we go into this common area, and there's some guys playing, I guess, snooker, maybe, and billiards, and she kind of introduces me to them, and we get to talking, and it's like, geez, we're in Helmand Province at the same time. And they're talking about operations that were going on, and I'm talking about our operations going on. It's like, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember hearing that. Hey, mate, hey, you remember this when this was going on, bruv? And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, yeah, man, we were insane. So, like, they're reminding me of stuff that I had long forgotten about. And they're not even Americans. And I'm like, geez, man, this is such a small world, but we were able to connect, and it was so cool to talk about those experiences together with some other people. And it was a good thing to see that there was an outlet for those soldiers to try to get back on their feet. And that's what the Department of Veteran Affairs was doing in the UK for them in Scotland. So that was pretty cool to see. So thanks, bro, for showing up, man. We're definitely going to have to hang out and connect and hopefully link up in the UK, man. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So my name is Talor. I'm from Israel. And first of all, thank you very much, because the whole time you were telling your story, my heart was like really beating fast. I served in the army for 5 years in Israel. And I just wanted to say, like, if someone here doesn't know, military service in Israel is obligatory. You finish your high school at the age of 18 and you go immediately to the army. Doesn't matter boy, girl, woman, man, you go to the army. And so I was a special operations officer for 5 years. And my partner in life, whom I met in the army, was also for 7 years in the army. And I just wanted to say, like, you learn so much from your service, but still, even though you learn so much, it takes a little piece of your soul, really. This is what I think. And some people, it takes a large piece. Some people, it takes a small piece, but it takes something. For example, till this day, I'm 10 years after my service. Till this day, sometimes when I leave a room, I think like, oh, where is my weapon? Because you have to carry your weapon with you all the time, right? But I'm 10 years after my service, and I still feel that feeling. And my partner, he served in the Syrian border, and he crossed injured civilians to Israel to get treatment. And he still has this image of the injured people crossing, and he told me something really strong. He told me, I saw people that I couldn't believe would live for like 1 day, injured so bad, but their will to live was so strong, and they made it. And it's not a question, it's more something I felt like I needed to say. My mother, when I was a little kid, she told me, I asked her, Mom, will I have to go to the army when I'm 18? And she said, don't worry, by the time you're 18, we won't need the army, right? But obviously this didn't happen. And so I just want to say thank you so much, because you telling your story and you guys coming to this conference and then, you know, doing good in your community. So maybe, I don't know, my kids or their kids will have really a chance to not going to the army. So thank you. And
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead. I'll get over here. Go ahead.
I am Vlad from University of Southern Queensland, Australia. I immigrated to Australia from Ukraine. My uncle has been to Afghanistan in 80s. He was Soviet infantryman in Host province. And the story he told me, I'll keep it short. Soviet medical personnel comes to the village, male doctor comes to the house, starts examining female local women. Husband gets very angry, takes shotgun, kills the doctor. The same day, Soviet army comes to the village, man gets killed, he has lots of relatives, they also pick up the weapon and start fighting the Soviet Union. So my question is, have you noticed that a lot of violence caused by lack of understanding, miscommunication, and misunderstanding of the intention? Because in this situation, in the beginning, nobody wanted to hurt that woman and this man.
You know, you hit it right there on the head. Like we've learned a lot of hard lessons because we never asked a question or wanted to get to know the people that we're working with. And so, yeah, you had those cultural differences where like, hey, it might be okay here, but it's not okay there. And we learned some really, really hard lessons in that. And those had third order effects because, like you said, you offend somebody, and in that culture, they're going to take action, and they took action.
And it gets escalating.
And it escalates. And the same thing with us. We've made the same mistakes, and we had the same thing happen to us, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. And you would have figured, hey, if it happened in the 80s, and we know that these things have happened, surely we would have figured it out by now, but no, we haven't. So like that, I've heard that story, but in a different aspect. And yeah, I think if we get to know one another culturally, then we could probably not have those miscommunications anymore. Thank you for that, man. You got it right there on the head. Good job.
Hello, my name is Sydney. I'm German and American, and just thank you for sharing your story. I don't know anyone in the military, so it's personally impactful. And my question was if you could talk more about the humanitarian aid work that you were doing, and you did say it inspired retribution by the Taliban. So do you believe it's the military's place to be carrying out humanitarian aid work when it can inspire retribution to schools, students, and also other NGO workers who might be seen as legitimate targets?
I got to be careful how I answer that. We could be doing humanitarian aid on one province or in a village, the next village over. There, NGOs might be out doing their stuff, but we would be there to protect that and to protect those individuals out there doing that aid. We've done that before. There's an apparatus for that. I mean, our job isn't there to protect the NGOs. That's kind of why we're not there right now anyways, protecting them. They have their own private security, but I think that's going down like treaties and conventions and foreign policy and laws and international laws and how the interagencies work and stuff like that. But I can definitely tell you on the humanitarian side of it, at least in Haiti, we were out there getting it done right next to the NGOs, handing stuff out, providing medicine and stuff. And where we were at in Afghanistan, we just didn't have a safe area for like the NGOs to come in, but we had our own doctors on our camp that were helping people. I mean, geez, there was a little girl that comes in, and she was, I guess she had touched a blasting cap that somebody was going to use to put inside of one of the IEDs. That blasting cap went off, and it cut her up really bad. And so the father's walking up the hill with his burning, or not burning, but bleeding baby. And we render first aid, and we had a trauma doctor right there on site with us. And he's giving aid until the medevac comes in to fly the daughter and the father out. So, I mean, we can only do so much. It's just hard to get involved with NGOs because of I think we start crossing fine lines, but we're trying. Like, we're trying to be as humanitarian as we can. And it's hard to tackle combat and humanitarian at the same time. We have a doctrine for that. It's called a 3-block war. And that you're doing humanitarian aid on one block, you're fighting somebody else on the next block, you're doing different type of aid on this block, and it's in our doctrine, but there's nothing in there that says anything about NGOs, so it's hard. So hopefully I answered your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jasmine. I'm a medical doctor and also studying at the University of Sydney in Australia. Thank you today. Your courage really shone through in your words. My question is around empathy and forgiveness. And you've touched on how you wanted to get to know the Afghans and how you have a respect for the Taliban. But can you talk about your experience of empathising or trying to be empathetic towards the people, the women, the children and the men that you've fought against?
So I didn't fight the women or the children, I fight for them. But as far as like empathy towards people, Rahelia is going to get up here and speak after me, and I love her to death, like family. I saw people like her get hurt by the war, and I have so much love for her and hope the best. And I would do anything. I would bend over backwards to help her. There's casualties of war. There's people in this audience that I mean, we could sit down and have chai and talk about stuff. Like I don't hold a grudge against anybody, even the people that were shooting at me. People were put in situations that they had no control over. Kids were exploited. Women were exploited. Like I can't hold that against them. I'm not walking in their shoes, you know. But we're both affected by this thing, so it's tough. But to be empathetic towards people, for me, it's easy to do that because if I wasn't empathetic, then I wouldn't be human. Just like when I killed that guy, like it hurt me so much. I couldn't see myself holding it against somebody because they come from a different walk of life and they were on the other side of the field from me. Like I can't do that. But if I have to protect life, I'll protect life. But you know, at all costs, you want to protect it, and the last thing you want to do is take away life. You know, you're a doctor. You know, it's just one of those things. It's hard for me to answer that question. Because I haven't had much interaction other than Rahelia with the Afghan women. When I was training the Afghans, the female engagement team members would work with the female Afghans. We couldn't do that because then we'd be breaching some cultural things that weren't going to fly. Now the children, you want to talk about children? Oh my gosh. One of the most traumatic things I have ever heard and witnessed was the exchange of little boys between some of these Afghan generals and police chiefs. They would exchange the little boys like it was just like, hey, look at this one. Here's my Bachabazi boy. You want to trade? And I'm pretty sure you can do with deductive reasoning what they're going to do with those children. And do you know what we couldn't do? Nothing. We could just watch it and do nothing. And we knew what was going on. We heard about what was going on. And you can look in that child's face and just see like their soul was taken away. And there was nothing we can do about it. And the one time somebody did do something about it, it was all over CNN. American soldier kills Afghan man for raping a boy. And then he gets thrown in jail because he's a murderer. So it's crazy. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
So
Sorry. I think we also spoke yesterday that some things you can't forgive. And perhaps it's really hard to empathise in those kind of situations where people are being exploited beyond what we could see as even a little bit reasonable.
I think that's where I draw the line in saying I'm not going to be empathetic towards a person that's doing that to a child. I don't care who you are. I mean, I don't have children yet, but my gosh, my mom was sexually abused, and that affected her so bad. She was molested by one of her uncles, and my grandfather, he wasn't that much of a decent human being to do anything about it. And that trauma that my mom had to live with, Just it made her bipolar, manic depression. I mean, you name it. It was bad, so bad that it would hospitalize her. And it just, I remember her telling me the stories, but she was just so loving and giving towards everybody. But to me, like when I witnessed that, and like there's a part of me that just, I wanted to go there and destroy that guy's life for doing that to a child. But it's a normal thing that we can't do anything about it. And if there's Afghans in the audience, you know, I'm not trying to say ill things. It's just, it's the elephant in the room right there. And I will definitely draw a line in the sand, and I don't stand for that. And I would do whatever it takes to save somebody from that happening, even if that meant me going to jail, because how dare you do that to a child? So thank you.